My wife had moved in with her MIL to look after her, so I went to surprise her with our son. The front door was ajar, and what we heard changed everything. Have you ever faced a moment so profoundly shocking, so utterly sickening, that it rips the very fabric of your reality to shreds? I did. I stood frozen in that doorway, my 7-year-old son, Ethan, pressing his little finger to his lips, his eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite grasp yet. And then I leaned in, just a bit, to see what had silenced him, what had rattled him so completely. There, in the living room, was my wife of 9 years, Sarah, laughing. Beside her, her mother, Brenda, also laughing. Both held wine glasses, both looked healthier, more vibrant than I'd seen them in months. And in that gut-wrenching instant, the truth hit me like a physical blow. Everything I'd believed for the past 7 weeks was a monstrous, calculated lie. The air in Brenda's house that day felt thick, not with the expected solemnity of a home-facing tragedy, but with a horrifying, carefree lightness. It was a stark contrast to the grief I'd been living. Just weeks before, Sarah had told me she needed to move in with Brenda to provide round-the-clock care. The reason? A stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnosis, the kind that means you're counting days, not years. I'd supported her without question. You do, don't you? When your family is facing something so devastating, you step up. I took over everything at home: school runs, homework battles, bedtime stories, bills for both households. I even sent Sarah $8,000 over those 7 weeks to cover medical expenses and whatever else they supposedly needed. I trusted her implicitly, the way you trust the woman you built a life with, the mother of your child. Why would anyone lie about something like cancer? But then, about 3 weeks in, the weird signs started. Little things that didn't quite add up, details I shoved down, feeling guilty for even noticing. Sarah was posting almost daily on Facebook updates about her caregiving journey. Photos of her by hospital equipment or holding Brenda's hand, with captions like, "Day 21 of caring for Mom." Some days are harder than others, but we keep fighting. Hundreds of likes, comments, prayers, heart emojis, offers of food. I'd scroll through them late at night, after putting Ethan to bed, feeling this gnawing disconnect. Her voice on our increasingly brief phone calls didn't sound exhausted, not really. And when I'd ask specific questions about doctors or treatment plans, she'd get vague, change the subject. Then there were the photos themselves. I'm no tech genius, but I know phones embed metadata. Some hospital photos she posted were actually taken at restaurants or shopping centers. I tried to rationalize it, maybe old photos, metadata errors. But the biggest crack in my denial, and this sounds absolutely ridiculous, was her nails. About a month in, during a video call, I noticed this elaborate, expensive manicure. Long acrylics, intricate designs, probably $80. When I commented, she got defensive, claimed they were from before she moved in, hadn't had time to remove them. I let it go. But 2 weeks later, driving by Brenda's house to drop off groceries, I saw Sarah getting out of a car. Her nails were different. A completely new design, fresh, obviously recent. When I brought it up, she insisted I was mistaken, that I was remembering wrong, making me feel paranoid, controlling, for even noticing. The DoorDash charges too. Our joint credit card statements showed almost daily orders: $147, $160, $120. Excessive for someone supposedly caring for a dying woman who couldn't eat much. She'd explained it was for both of them, sometimes other family members visiting. It sounded plausible enough then. But these inconsistencies, each a tiny drip, were slowly filling a bucket I couldn't ignore anymore. My surprise visit that Friday wasn't some planned interrogation. I genuinely wanted to do something kind. I packed Ethan after school, drove the 40 minutes to Brenda's house, hoping to take Sarah out for dinner, give her a break. The front door was slightly ajar. Cracked just enough to hear voices. Ethan peeked through the gap, then froze, turned to me with a look I'd never seen, whispering, "Look, but be quiet." I bent down. And there they were, on the couch. Sarah and Brenda, dressed in expensive athleisure, like they'd just come from the gym. Wine glasses in hand, a nice bottle of red on the coffee table. Both laughing at something on a laptop. Brenda looked nothing like someone in the final stages of pancreatic cancer. Color in her cheeks, sitting upright, fluid, energetic. And Sarah? She looked relaxed, happy, in a way she hadn't been when she actually lived at home with me and Ethan. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, my brain trying to process the impossible. Then, I heard Brenda ask, "Should we post the hospital photo now or save it for tomorrow?" Sarah laughed. "Space them out so people don't get suspicious." They scrolled through photos on the laptop, commenting on which ones looked more authentic, which angles made Brenda look sicker. I pulled Ethan back, walked as quickly to the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive home felt like an out-of-body experience. Nothing was real anymore. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sat in the dark living room, forcing myself to think, to look at all those small, weird signs I'd ignored. The picture that emerged was so much worse than I'd wanted to believe. I grabbed my laptop, went through Sarah's Facebook posts, screenshotting everything, checking metadata. The more I looked, the more obvious it became, she'd been staging the entire thing. The next morning, I called a private investigator, one of those services that feels sleazy just to Google. I explained the situation. There was a long pause. He said he'd seen cases like this before, and they never ended well for the person doing the lying. That night, staring at his contact info on my screen, I whispered, "If I'm wrong, I'll live with that. But if I'm right, everything is about to burn." 3 days later, the investigator called. The tone in his voice told me everything before he'd even started. He'd followed Sarah for 72 hours straight, documenting every movement, every location, every interaction. What he found was beyond anything I'd imagined. No hospital visits, no doctor appointments, no chemo. Nothing suggesting a dying cancer patient. Instead, he'd watched Sarah attend yoga classes at an upscale studio, have 2-hour lunches with friends at expensive restaurants, multiple bottles of wine, shopping sprees at Nordstrom and Sephora, spending money like she was on vacation. Brenda was with her for most of it, looking perfectly healthy, energetic, laughing, chatting, moving with an ease impossible for someone in stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He had photos and videos of everything, time-stamped, geolocated, an irrefutable timeline contradicting every single thing Sarah had told me. He even had video of them at a wine bar on an afternoon. Sarah had texted me, saying Brenda was having a particularly rough day and couldn't have visitors. In the video, they were toasting with champagne. Then he told me something that made my stomach drop in a way even the fake cancer hadn't. Something that transformed this from personal betrayal into an actual crime. He'd found a GoFundMe page Sarah had created about 3 weeks into her supposed caregiving journey. Titled "Help Brenda Fight Stage 4 Cancer," with a long, emotional description about her mother's diagnosis, the devastating financial burden, and how any support would mean the world. The page had photos of Brenda looking frail, weak, obviously staged with props and lighting to appear genuinely sick. It had raised $22,680 from over 300 donors. I sat there, staring at my phone, as he sent me the link. Comment after comment from friends, coworkers, distant relatives, complete strangers. People moved enough by the story to donate money they probably couldn't afford to spare. The investigator's voice hardened. This isn't just about a lying spouse anymore. This is felony fraud. Federal wire fraud, specifically. You need to understand the seriousness. This crime comes with prison time. I thanked him, ended the call, and immediately started going through that GoFundMe page with a sick feeling growing in my chest. I recognized so many names. People from Sarah's office, neighbors, even some of my own family members who'd contributed without mentioning it, wanting to help. Sarah's best friend had donated $500, commenting how Brenda was like a second mother. Ethan's teacher, $75. A couple from our church, $200, with a note about prayers. Every single one of them manipulated, stolen from. That same afternoon, I called a lawyer specializing in divorce and fraud. When I walked into her office and laid everything out, she leaned back, let out a low whistle. One of the most clear-cut cases of charity fraud I've seen in 15 years. She explained it wasn't just morally wrong, it was multiple felonies, wire fraud, theft by deception at minimum. She asked if I wanted to pursue criminal charges or just handle it through divorce. Pressing charges meant Ethan's mother could end up in federal prison. But then she pointed out something I hadn't fully considered: all those donors deserved to know they'd been scammed, deserved their money back. Staying silent would make me complicit. She advised me to gather every piece of evidence, document meticulously, and prepare for it to get very ugly, very fast. I left her office with a strategy that felt both necessary and terrifying: expose everything simultaneously, so Sarah couldn't control the narrative or destroy evidence. The lawyer also suggested I file for divorce immediately. That evening, I started building the case. Months of credit card statements, matching charges to Sarah's Facebook posts, dozens of instances where she'd claimed to be at the hospital on days our card showed purchases at restaurants 30 miles away. All the investigators' photos and videos, organized by date and location, an undeniable timeline of deception. Screenshots of every post, every comment, every update about Brenda's deteriorating condition. The entire GoFundMe page downloaded, full list of donors and comments, preserving everything before she could delete it. Then I did something that felt like crossing a line, but I knew was necessary. I called Brenda's oncologist, the doctor Sarah had mentioned in her posts. The receptionist initially refused information due to privacy. But when I explained I was trying to verify a cancer diagnosis for legal purposes and could obtain a subpoena, she transferred me to the office manager. The manager put me on hold for several minutes. When she returned, her voice was carefully neutral. She confirmed Brenda had been a patient, discharged over a year ago after treatment for a non-cancerous growth. Brenda had no current cancer diagnosis, was considered completely healthy, with no follow-up scheduled. I asked if she'd provide that in writing with a subpoena. She said the office would comply. That phone call was the final nail in the coffin of any lingering doubt. Absolute proof. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a calculated fraud. Sarah and Brenda hadn't just stretched the truth about a medical situation, they'd invented a terminal illness from complete scratch. Used it to manipulate everyone for money, sympathy, and apparently, just time away from real responsibilities. I spent the next 2 days drafting emails. One to the police, with the investigators' full report and a detailed timeline. One to GoFundMe's fraud department, with documentation of the fake cancer claim and proof from the medical office. One to the 3 local news stations. I knew this kind of story, feel-good donation campaigns turning out to be scams, was exactly what they covered. And one final email to all 300-plus donors, BCC, so no one's email was exposed, explaining what I'd discovered, apologizing profusely for Sarah's actions, and assuring them I'd cooperate fully to get their money returned. I sat there, staring at my computer, all 4 emails queued up, ready to send. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew once I clicked, there would be no going back. I thought about Ethan, how this would affect him, whether I was destroying his mother's life. But then I thought about all those people who'd been stolen from, people who'd given money out of genuine compassion and deserved justice. And then I thought about what kind of person I'd be if I let Sarah get away with this. What kind of example that would set for my son about accountability and consequences. My cursor moved over that send button. I whispered to the empty room, if I'm wrong, I'll live with that. But if I'm right, everything is about to burn. I clicked send on all 4 simultaneously. Watched them disappear from my outbox. And felt this strange mix of relief and absolute terror wash over me. No taking any of it back now. Within 20 minutes, my phone started buzzing. Responses from donors, shock, anger, gratitude. I turned off notifications. The police responded within an hour, opening an investigation, needing a formal statement. GoFundMe froze the account immediately, an automated message saying they'd begin their fraud review and work on returning funds. 2 of the 3 news stations called that evening, asking for an on-camera interview. I agreed. I wanted everyone to know exactly what Sarah had done. No possibility of her spinning this, playing the victim. The next morning, I packed Ethan into the car and drove back to Brenda's house. The same house where this entire nightmare had started. I wanted to confront Sarah face to face before she heard about the exposure from someone else. Wanted to see her reaction. The front door was unlocked this time. I could hear them inside, what sounded like a casual planning meeting. Sarah's voice, saying they needed to post another hospital update soon to keep donations coming, maybe add details about experimental treatments to justify asking for more money. I pushed the door open, walked straight into the living room. There they were, on that same couch, laptop open between them, surrounded by shopping bags from their latest spree. The looks on their faces when they saw me went from surprise, to confusion, to something like primal fear, all in about 3 seconds. Sarah started to say something, probably some excuse, asking why I hadn't called. But I cut her off. How long were you planning to keep this going? She tried to play dumb, that innocent expression that probably would have worked 7 weeks ago. I pulled out my phone, started reading from the investigator's report, specific dates, locations, activities. Her face went from confused, to pale, to absolutely white as she realized I knew everything. Brenda tried to defend it at first, claiming they needed money for other medical expenses, that the GoFundMe was a legitimate way to get help for various health issues. I just told her I'd spoken to her oncologist. I knew there was no cancer. Had never been any stage 4 diagnosis. Nothing. They both went completely silent. Sarah finally asked, her voice shaking, "What have you done?" I told her the truth, without emotion. I've sent everything to the police. To GoFundMe. To the news stations. And to every single person who donated money to your fake fundraiser. The color drained from her face completely. She stood up, like she was going to run. There's nowhere to go, I told her. The police are probably already on their way. You need to understand the magnitude of what you've done. She started crying then, saying she'd made a mistake, asking if we could just return the money quietly, make it all go away, promising she'd never do anything like this again if I'd just help her fix it. I almost laughed at the absurdity of thinking she could commit federal wire fraud involving hundreds of victims and just apologize her way out of it. Brenda started yelling at me, calling me vindictive, cruel for destroying their lives over what she called a harmless scheme. I pointed out that $22,000 stolen from hundreds of people who trusted them wasn't harmless. It was a serious felony. And they were both about to face the consequences. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers, clearly briefed, walked in knowing exactly what they were dealing with. They separated Sarah and Brenda, taking statements individually. I watched through the doorway as Sarah tried to explain herself, sounding like the victim, claiming stress, not thinking clearly, never meaning for things to go this far. The officers weren't impressed. After about an hour, they told both women they'd be hearing from detectives soon about formal charges. The investigation would move quickly. I took Ethan and left before the officers did, not wanting him to see any more of this. On the drive home, he asked, in this small voice, why was Mommy crying? I told him as gently as I could that Mommy had made some very bad choices, and she was going to have to face consequences. That sometimes grown-ups do things that hurt other people, even when they're supposed to know better. But that none of this was his fault. The local news ran the story that evening, leading with a headline about a local woman scamming hundreds of donors with a fake cancer diagnosis. They included Sarah's photo, screenshots of the GoFundMe page, her Facebook posts. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, some supportive, some accusatory, asking how I couldn't have known, whether I'd been in on it. The investigation moved quickly. Detectives interviewed dozens of donors, subpoenaed records from GoFundMe and from the various stores and restaurants where Sarah had spent money. Within 3 weeks, they'd built a case, wire fraud, theft by deception, and charity fraud charges for both Sarah and Brenda. The prosecutor told me it was one of the most clear-cut fraud cases she'd handled. The evidence was overwhelming, the victims numerous and sympathetic. Sarah was fired from her job the day the news broke. Through mutual friends, I heard she became completely socially isolated. The trial took 4 months to get to court. I attended every day with my lawyer, watching as the prosecution laid out the timeline of fraud in excruciating detail. Photos of Sarah at expensive restaurants on days she'd posted about sleepless nights in the hospital. Credit card statements showing thousands in luxury purchases funded by donated money. Testimony from Brenda's oncologist, confirming no cancer diagnosis. Statements from donors who'd given money they couldn't afford based on a completely fabricated story. Sarah's lawyer tried to argue it was just exaggeration that got out of hand. She never intended to hurt anyone, just made poor decisions during a difficult time. The jury didn't buy it. They found both Sarah and Brenda guilty on all counts after deliberating for less than 3 hours. The judge sentenced Sarah to 12 years in federal prison and Brenda to 8, saying their calculated deception and exploitation of people's compassion warranted significant punishment. I sat in that courtroom, listening to the sentences, and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just empty exhaustion and relief that it was finally over. My divorce was finalized about 6 months after the criminal trial, the process dragging on because Sarah's legal situation complicated everything. But eventually, the judge granted me full custody of Ethan and divided what little assets we had left after the legal fees and restitution payments. I started taking Ethan to therapy immediately to help him process everything. The therapist helped him understand his mother's choices weren't his fault, and it was okay to feel confused, angry, or sad. He asked me once, during a quiet moment, if I still loved his mom. I told him the truth, as carefully as I could. That I loved who I thought she was, but not who she really turned out to be. And that sometimes people aren't who we think they are. And that's not our failure. Sarah tried to call me from prison a few months into her sentence. Probably wanting to apologize, or ask for something, or just hear a familiar voice. But I let it go to voicemail, then blocked the number without listening to the message. I had nothing left to say to her. For the first time in years, sitting in my living room, Ethan asleep upstairs in his own bed, no more lies to uncover, no more evidence to gather, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. I felt peace. After living through this nightmare, I still grapple with how deeply I was deceived. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.